Hello once again, everyone. My name is Calvin Bonenberger Jr., and I'm the town administrator for the town of Rising Sun. Welcome to the third video in our comprehensive plan, zoning code changes and updates video series. The town recently drafted two separate ordinances that will make changes to the town's zoning code if they are adopted by the mayor and commissioners. In an effort to provide additional information and clear up a few misconceptions, the mayor and commissioners have asked me to provide a video presentation and to offer greater clarity and a better understanding of what these changes will entail and how they can positively affect the community at large. This is not as easy as it might appear because there is a significant and comprehensive legislative framework of laws and regulations in place that deal with the concepts of zoning codes, why they are required, what their purpose is, and how they are developed. However, instead of having one long presentation, I felt it might be best to break the concepts into four individual series of videos titled, What is a Comprehensive Plan? Why is it required? And how does it affect the town? The purpose and benefit of zoning districts and the creation of zoning maps. A summary of Ordinance 2022-01, Amending and Creating Zoning Districts, and the last video, a summary of Ordinance 2022-02, Comprehensive Rezoning Phase 1. My hope is that you will find these videos informative while also answering any questions or concerns you might have on the process. If you have any questions about the videos or need more information, please don't hesitate to email me at tabonenberger@risingsunmd.org. And as a quick reminder, the mayor and commissioners will be holding a public hearing to discuss these changes on Tuesday evening, March 22nd at 7 p.m. The meeting will be held at the Community Fire Company of Rising Sun, located at 300 Joseph Biggs Memorial Highway. So hopefully you have been able to watch videos 1 and 2, which were developed to provide you with some background regarding why these two ordinances are being considered. Hopefully you have a better understanding of the process, scope, and intent behind the changes. So let's take a look at the third video in the series. It's titled, A Summary of Ordinance 2022-01, Amending and Creating Zoning Districts. But as a quick recap, we loaded video 1 titled, What is a Comprehensive Plan? Why is it required? And how does it affect the town? That the state is essentially charging the town with the responsibility of developing a plan, a comprehensive plan that outlines policies and goals for private and public land use that addresses specific elements set forth by the state and determined to be critical and vital to ensuring the coordinated, adjusted, and harmonious development of the town. We also loaded video 2 titled The Purpose and Benefits of Zoning Districts and the Creation of Zoning Maps, that the state further charges the mayor and commissioners with developing zoning regulations in accordance with the town's comprehensive plan and with reasonable considerations for, among other things, the character of the district or zone and its suitability for particular uses, and with a view to conserving the value of property and encouraging orderly development in the most appropriate use of land. To further achieve the objectives of the plan, the zoning regulation shall be designed to control street congestion, promote health, public safety, and general welfare, provide adequate light and air, promote the conservation of natural resources, prevent environmental pollution, properly manage growth and development, and promote or facilitate adequate transportation, water, sewage, schools, recreation, parks, and other public facilities. The town has completed its review of certain portions of its existing zoning code and has determined that the zoning code needs to be amended and updated in order to ensure that the objectives and policies set forth in the town's comprehensive plan are implemented. Ordinance 2022-01, titled Amending and Creating Zoning Districts, has been presented and is currently under consideration. This ordinance is rather straightforward, and it's designed to cover a few new zoning concepts while cleaning up some discrepancies in the existing zoning code. Number one, the ordinance will clarify the actual title of the zoning regulations as the zoning code and not a zoning ordinance. It will update the table of zoning districts to A, add zoning districts that were previously listed in the regulations, but not included in the table of listed districts. B, remove the reference to zoning districts that are in the existing table of zoning districts, but never addressed in the actual zoning regulations. It will update the list of zoning districts to include a narrative of their intended purpose, densities of land, coverage, or intensities of land use, as we previously described in video 2. Number 4, it will create and establish some new zoning districts based upon the town's efforts to identify the proposed zoning for lands that are part of the town's comprehensive plan growth element as listed in the comprehensive plan. It will establish new zoning districts that match Cecil County's efforts to preserve rural areas. 6, it will establish a hierarchy of residential zones with a range of residential densities and residential types needed to support a variety of housing types by location, character, and lot size. It will also add new categories of very low, low, medium, and high density residential zones. And finally, number 7, the ordinance will also create new commercial land use policies that are consistent with the actual built environment of the town, while also addressing and establishing a greater range of commercial zoning categories aimed at developing high-impact, sustainable businesses with higher-paying jobs, while also developing a viable, efficient system of commercial uses and intensities to further support a range of commercial uses by location, character, lot size, traffic, and parking. So let's take a look at the actual ordinance. But please note that there is a lot of text that is related to legal jargon, if you will, and language that must be contained in the actual ordinance document, but it's not part of the final regulation that would become part of the actual zoning code. Most of our review of the ordinance will focus on the more salient points. So let me share my screen. First thing I wanted to show you is the town's zoning map. So if you recall in video 2, we talked about the zoning map. And just to recap, the existing zoning code has zoning districts, as you can see over here on the left. Those zoning districts have colored polygons that represent those zoning districts, and you can see them on the map itself. So now let's take a look at the actual zoning ordinance. Now, this is an ordinance that is amending existing zoning districts and creating and defining new zoning districts as recommended in the town's comprehensive plan, as defined below. Then let's look at some of what is established in this zoning ordinance. Proposed ordinance reaffirms what is already in the state law. So in the state law, it gives the elected body it has a statement of policy that the orderly development and use of land and structures requires comprehensive regulation through the implementation of planning and zoning controls, and that those controls shall be implemented by local government. In addition to the above, under zoning regulations adopted purposes, it provides the mayor and commissioners with the authority to adopt zoning regulations in accordance with the town's comprehensive plan, and with reasonable considerations for, among other things, the character of the district or zone and its suitability for particular uses, and with a view to conserving the value of property and encouraging orderly development in the most appropriate use of land. So back in June of 2019, the Town of Rising Sun adopted a document titled Town of Rising Sun Comprehensive Plan, with the general purpose of guiding and accomplishing the coordinated, adjusted, and harmonious development of the town, and best practices for promoting health, safety, morals, order, convenience, prosperity, general welfare, and shall serve as a guide to public and private actions and decisions to ensure the development of public and private property and appropriate relationship, and which shall include any areas outside of the town boundaries which have been identified as part of the town's designated growth area. In addition, the comprehensive plan recommends residential land use policies that include the development of a hierarchy of residential zones with a range of residential densities and residential types needed to support a variety of housing types by location, character, and lot size, with these zones designed to reflect very low, medium, and high density development types. In addition, the town already has medium and higher density development zones, but does not have any zones to reflect the low and very low rural residential density developments already existing in the town's future growth and proposed annexation areas. And therefore, the plan suggests the creation of two new residential zones to include an RE, residential estate zoning classification, that preserves the very rural, low-density nature and intent of the county's northern agricultural residential NAR zoning, and a RR, rural residential zoning classification that preserves the low-density rural residential character and intent of the county's rural residential RR zoning. And whereas the comprehensive plan also recommends commercial land use policies that are consistent with the actual built environment, while also establishing a greater range of commercial zoning categories aimed at developing high-impact sustainable businesses with higher paying jobs, while also developing a viable, efficient system of commercial uses and intensities, and to further support a range of commercial uses by location, character, lot size, traffic, and parking. So in essence, the other thing this ordinance is going to do is it's going to create some new zoning districts, as we talked about. So some of those new zoning districts are going to be Old Town Commercial Center, or OTC, Limited Commercial, or LC, Neighborhood Convenience Center, or NC, Employment Center, or EC, and the Rural Business, or RB. So in essence, this ordinance has laid out exactly what it intends to do, which is to make amendments to the zoning code so that the policies and goals of the comprehensive plan can be implemented. So let's take a closer look at the actual changes. So as I said previously, one of the changes is going to be to change the title of this section of the town code, which currently says that the title of this town code is Town of Rising Sun Zoning Ordinance. It's really not an ordinance. So a change is going to be made to delete the word ordinance and replace it with the word code, so that the official title of this chapter in the town's code will be the Town of Rising Sun Zoning Code. The other change that's going to take place is right now there is a table of districts in the existing code. So let's take a look at that real quick. So in the existing code, which is what I have here, there is basically this paragraph that has the districts that are currently in the code. Well, from a readability standpoint, this is really convoluted and difficult to separate and piecemeal out. So what this ordinance is going to do is it's going to basically separate all that language to standalone, easier list of zoning districts. The other thing I want to point out is that although the existing code talks about having 10 zoning districts, we will be increasing it to 14 zoning districts, in part because we're adding some zones that were in the existing code but never listed in that paragraph. And then we're also adding some new zoning districts to mirror the zoning that is provided for in the county in our efforts of trying to protect the rural character of the Town of Rising Sun. So when you look at this, there is an RO residential district. The Town of Rising Sun does not have an RO residential district. None of our zoning maps reflect RO, and our table of permissible uses does not reflect any uses in an RO zoning district. So it doesn't exist. The other thing we're going to do is we're basically changing the name of the LC light commercial district to limited commercial district. That is born in part because in the existing zoning code, this particular zoning district is referenced both ways. It's referenced as a limited commercial district and a light commercial district. So we're just going to solidify that once and for all. The other thing is our existing zoning code has a F1 floodplain zone district. In the concept of zoning districts, you don't make a zoning district called a floodplain. A floodplain is a condition of the area. In other words, when it rains really bad, it is an area that has been identified by the Federal Emergency Management Association as an area that floods. So it either floods or it doesn't flood. There's no need to have a zoning district for that. So we're going to be eliminating that. The other thing is that the existing code has an AR or agricultural district. Just like the RO residential district, we don't have an agricultural district in the town of Rising Sun. We have some land that previously was in the county. It was annexed into the town. It was farming at that time and still continues to farm at that time. But they were given basically a grandfathering status in order to be able to annex into town. Those particular pieces of property are targeted for future development, and they will not continue to be used as agricultural. So here's another thing that I had talked about. So we reference the RO town residential district, and in here there's some language that talks about the density and some of the specifics, but we don't have that RO zoning district. Another thing that needs to be cleaned up is we do have an R1 single family residential district, and we do have an R2 zoning district, but it's not called single family residential district. It's actually called mixed residential. So there's basically a typo in the book that basically has these two intended different types of zoning densities basically titled the same way and then identified the same way. And then the other thing that's in our existing zoning code is that the R3 zoning is listed mixed residential district. That title should actually be up here for R2, and the real title for R3 is multifamily residential district. So that basically is a quick look at our existing zoning code to see some of the discrepancies that we're looking to eliminate. So here, back to the existing ordinance, these are the new or modified list of 14 zoning districts that will be in the town code. So let's look specifically at some of these. We have a new RE rural estates. And as I said, this is being created to help protect the rural character and nature of the area of the town of Rising Sun, especially properties that may annex into the town in the future and are part of the town's designated growth area. So the RE Rural Estate District, the regulations of this zone are intended to establish very low density single family detached residences and supporting uses with the intent of maintaining and preserving the rural character of the town of Rising Sun and the Rising Sun region. Residential development will require one dwelling unit per 10 acres, and a minimum of 60% of the total lot area will be required to be designated as open space. This is essentially the same language that the county has in the NAR zoning district or Northern Agricultural Residential. The other new zoning district is the RR Rural Residential District. The regulations of this zone are intended to establish low-density, single-family detached residences and supporting uses with the intent of maintaining and preserving the rural character of the Rising Sun region and to provide for a manageable amount of rural residential development that does not overload the community infrastructure with services and is compatible and harmonious with the adjacent areas. Residential development will require one dwelling unit per acre in minor subdivisions and one dwelling unit for 3 acres in a major subdivision. I think it's also important to point out that in reality, the density in the town's RR residential area will actually be lower in many cases than what the county already permits. In the county has the same language, one dwelling unit per acre in a minor subdivision. But a minor subdivision in the county is the development of 4 residential dwellings or less. So that would mean if there's a piece of land in the county zoned RR that somebody wants to develop and put 4 residential houses on it, each one of those houses can be on a 1 acre lot. Once they get up over 4, in other words, when they go to develop 5 or more, then each one of those houses has to sit on 3 acres. Conversely, in the town of Rising Sun, our minor subdivision is 3 houses or less. So in the equation where the county would permit the development of 4 houses, all on single family lots, we would require those 4 houses to actually be on 3 acre lots. So our rural residential is actually going to be a bit more restrictive in terms of allowable densities. We have in the code our R1 single family district. It's basically saying the same thing it did before. As I pointed out in the other document, the proper title for R2, mixed residential district, is defined here. The language in here is essentially the same as what's in the code. The R3 multifamily district has the right title for R3. We have the limited commercial district here. And the limited commercial district is basically a zone that's intended to support commercial and employment uses that meet the daily convenience and shopping needs of nearby residents, focusing on retail and service uses and generally located on commercial lots less than 3 acres in size, or are part of a series of contiguous commercial lots to create a district or node. Then we also have our commercial center district. Now, nothing has really changed in this zoning designation. However, as you're going to see in a couple moments here, that the town of Rising Sun basically created a one-size-fits-all zoning designation when they created the commercial center district. In other words, essentially anything that wasn't light industrial or wasn't limited commercial or was not residential was going to be central commercial. But as you can see in the documents here, a central commercial property, a lot, should generally be larger than 3 acres in size. And that is typically located in parks or campus-like form with access provided from internal access streets that are combined commercial facilities with other types of uses such as light industrial uses or additional community facilities in order to create community focal points. The problem is when the town created the one-size-fits-all, they put the existing buildings along Main Street like Rise and Grind and the Bog Total, those buildings or businesses in there, and they classified them as central commercial or commercial center. Unfortunately, they're all what is called legally non-conforming lots because they don't meet the definition of the lot sizes that are required in a commercial center zoning district. Now, that doesn't mean they can't continue to operate because obviously they are able to operate those businesses. Those businesses have been able to operate for the last 20 years because this zoning code is at least 20 years of age. So all those businesses were grandfathered. But the problem with a legal non-conforming use, which basically means it's not conforming, but it's recognized as being legal, is that you can't make a legal non-conforming use more non-conforming. So in other words, if there's a limit on the height of a building of 35 feet, and your building is already at 38 feet high, but you come in and say, I want to put some new facade on the outside of the building that's going to raise the height to 40, you can't do that because you can't take what was already non-conforming and make it more non-conforming. So what that means is our businesses on the Main Street area are not afforded the same benefits as other businesses that are located in central commercial districts and other areas of the town, meaning that other areas can make their building bigger, can do some things that are permitted in the central commercial zoning district, and they can do it as a use by right. They don't have to spend money to get special exceptions and variances. Whereas some of the businesses in our Main Street area, if they wanted to make changes to their buildings that normally would be permissible, they can't because they can't make a legal non-conforming use more non-conforming. So this is an effort to make our downtown area more business friendly. So with that said, we then move into a new zoning district that was created called OTC, known as Old Town Commercial Central Center District. So everything I just said about the problems with the improper classification of the buildings in our Main Street area have been resolved by creating this Old Town Commercial Center District, which will now make everything that they're doing down there a legal use, a legal conforming use, not a non-conforming use. And that the type of things that you would want to do in a central commercial area within reason, such as enlarging your building or doing other types of uses, they are now going to be able to do that without having to unnecessarily spend money that their counterparts in other areas of central commercial wouldn't have to spend. So that's how we solved a very important issue to make our downtown area more business friendly. The other new zoning district that's being created is the EC Employment Center District. Now, this is essentially a district that's going to be located up on the Route 1 corridor north of town. And basically what that is saying is that we would like to attract high impact businesses to that area that would also generate large populations of employment. So let's look at some of those. So in the zoning district, we're looking to establish commercial type uses that provide large employment populations, including offices, research, hospital, and manufacturing uses that are located in parts of a campus-like form with access provided from internal access streets that combine commercial facilities with other types of uses such as light industrial uses or additional community facilities such as library branch and meeting areas to create community focal points. Mixed-use employment centers should provide convenient shopping facilities as well as some light industrial and research facility buildings for those residents living within a planned development. So basically what we're saying here is up on the Route 1 corridor, we have the ability to attract some really good businesses that would create high-paying jobs for our residents. And in this zoning, creating the zoning ordinance, we would consider creating financial incentives to get those high-impact businesses to move into that area, businesses like data centers and technology. And essentially what we are trying to do is to create a technology corridor along the Route 1 corridor. As a matter of fact, if you recall a couple months ago, the town submitted a grant application and was awarded money through a grant to bring fiber optic cable out to the Route 1 corridor to make it more attractive to attract those high-paid, skilled jobs. In addition, we would create incentives that if those businesses that are high impact, that if they created those high-paid jobs and they guaranteed them to a certain percentage of people who live in the town of Rising Sun, we could then provide even more incentives for that to happen. So if you're familiar with land development in general, what we're sort of creating is an enterprise zone. Unfortunately, our town doesn't qualify for enterprise zones, which normally there would be federal and state subsidies given to those businesses to relocate in an enterprise zone. So we're basically just creating our own variation of what would actually be a enterprise zone, but we want to make sure that we're getting good businesses. We're not looking for warehouses. We're not looking for distribution centers. We're looking for multiple people employed, getting really good salaries to be able to work there. So our light industrial area is essentially going to remain the same. There's really no changes in the light industrial area, but we are going to create a new RB rural business district. And the regulations of this zone are intended to support the potential annexation of existing county zone commercial properties in the rural areas without also expanding the range and intensity of commercial uses that are generally allowed in the town's commercial center district, but with greater restrictions to maintain and facilitate the preservation of the rural character of the Rising Sun region and to provide for a manageable amount of commercial development that does not overload the community infrastructure with services and is compatible and harmonious with the adjacent areas. So basically what we're looking to do there is when properties annex into the town, we have to have a zoning designation to lay over that piece of land when it annexes in the town. And a lot of our zoning is more or less about intense uses in the town. That's why you have incorporated towns, to draw those things into a town center. But the county has out in the county rural areas what they call rural business that allows certain types of commercial uses, but there's sort of an overlay of how much they can intensify and then what those properties essentially have to look like. And so we're just creating that rural business zoning designation so that we're ready to go if businesses outside of the town of Rising Sun want to annex into town. So in addition, in this rural business area, we're looking for landscape buffers, native tree plantings, as well as imaginative site and architectural design that would encourage the maintenance of a more rural appearance, especially along the highway, and commercial strip development along the highway should be avoided. So basically, we're looking at maintaining the rural heritage of the area, allowing businesses just like the county does, but we want to make sure that when you're leaving the town of Rising Sun and heading out into the more rural areas, those commercial properties provide a nice transition from the urban area out to the rural area. So we still have a mobile home district in here. There are some cleanup of language about controlled industrial districts and planned unit development. Basically, what you're seeing here is we're renumbering where they're located in the code because we created new zoning districts, which changes the numbers. So we had to renumber these sections accordingly. We're talking about planned unit development. We basically changed some of the regulations of planned unit development, which are basically called PUDs, which basically allow you to take large pieces of land that would normally be zoned for a lower density. And if you build all those proposed properties into basically a quarter of the property and end up having essentially the same amount of open space that you would if you would have built to the lower density, you can actually get more homes or more buildings in the PUD. So basically what I'm saying is that if a piece of land or a farm were to annex into town and they, by zoning, had the ability to build 100 homes in that development, we, based upon the zoning, we're not really looking for them to decide to build a PUD. And because they have enough land to maintain the same amount of open space that they would have had if they would have built 100 homes, under the old definition of the PUD, they might have been able to build 150 or 200 homes at a concentrated area. We are now talking about reducing that, and we're also talking about increasing the amount of acreage that is needed to actually have a PUD to begin with. So that's the change that we're looking for in that section. And the other thing is that our existing zoning code talked about neighborhood convenience centers. There's all kinds of language in there about what a neighborhood convenience center is, but it didn't really list it anywhere. You had to extrapolate that from different pieces of text language throughout the code. So basically what we've done is consolidated into one standalone section that describes what a neighborhood convenience center is. So that essentially concludes the review of the more salient portions of Ordinance 2022-01. So in closing, this ordinance is essentially proposing changes to portions of the existing zoning code for the purpose of cleaning up inconsistent language and discrepancies already found in the code, while also amending existing zoning districts for greater clarity of the purpose and intent, while also creating and defining new zoning districts, all with the purpose of trying to maintain the rural character of the town of Rising Sun and the region of Rising Sun. And with that, this concludes the third video in our zoning code and comprehensive plan video series. Once again, I hope that I have been effective at providing you with an overview of the proposed zoning code changes. If you were not able to watch all of the videos in the series, I strongly encourage you to do so. It will make all of this make a lot more sense. If you have any questions or concerns about this ordinance, please contact me. As always, we thank you for your interest in these matters, and please contact me if you have any questions or concerns.